I froze his account. Right there in my office. The same bank where I'd worked for 27 years. I clicked one button, and within seconds, every cent in that arrogant boy's account turned to dust in front of him. His $75,000 demand, gone. His smug face when he told me no money, no wedding, gone too. He didn't know who he was dealing with. He forgot whose hands controlled the system that fed his greed. That day, in my dark gray suit and trembling hands, I sat in the glass wall manager's office of Liberty Union Bank, my jaw locked tight as I stared at his name glowing on my monitor, Ethan Cole, my daughter's fiancé, the man who had just demanded $75,000 from me, less than 24 hours before their wedding. And now his balance read $0. I remember the silence that followed. The air felt heavy, almost electric, like the calm before a thunderstorm. My phone buzzed again as call. I didn't answer. I just leaned back, exhaled slowly, and whispered to myself, "You mess with the wrong father, son." But what he did next, I didn't see coming. If you're watching this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because you're not ready for what happens next. My name is Michael Reed, a 56-year-old single father, a senior loan officer at Liberty Union Bank in Chicago. I raised my daughter Grace alone after her mother, Anna, passed away from ovarian cancer 12 years ago. Grace was just 15 then, fragile, quiet, broken. I promised Anna on her deathbed I'd protect our daughter, even if it cost me everything. Grace grew up kind, hardworking, and too trusting for her own good. She became a nurse, always smiling, always helping others, the kind of person who apologized even when someone else bumped into her. When she brought Ethan home for the first time, I knew something was off, that fake politeness, the overconfident smile. But Grace, she saw love. I saw calculation. Ethan was handsome, ambitious, and dangerously charming, the kind of man who talks too much about investments, but never explains where money comes from. He worked at a tech startup, though no one seemed to know what that meant. Still, Grace loved him, and for her happiness, I swallowed my doubts. Their engagement was fast, too fast. 6 months after meeting him, she called me one night, crying with joy, telling me Ethan proposed. I forced a smile, congratulated her, and pretended the knot in my stomach wasn't there. As the wedding approached, I noticed things. Ethan's constant excuses about work, his calls that ended when I entered the room, the way he flinched when I mentioned background checks. I started digging quietly. What I found made my blood run cold. Ethan was drowning in debt, personal loans, unpaid credit cards, and a failed crypto scheme. And worse, he'd been using Grace's name on some of his business investments. My daughter didn't know. Still, I stayed quiet. I needed proof before I confronted him. But then came that day before the wedding. He called me to a cafe near the church, sat across from me in his expensive jacket, an arrogant grin. "Mr. Reed," he said, sipping his coffee, "there's something we need to talk about before tomorrow." I leaned back, wary. "What's that?" "The wedding," he said casually, "isn't happening unless you transfer $75,000 to my account. Today." I laughed. I thought he was joking, but his face stayed stone cold. "Grace doesn't need to know," he added. "You're a banker. You can make it look clean. Think of it as an investment in your daughter's happiness." Something inside me snapped. For a moment, I saw red, not anger, but pain, the kind that twists your heart when you realize someone's using your child. I stood up and said nothing. He smirked and leaned back. "You've got till midnight, old man," he said, "or there's no wedding tomorrow." When I got to my office that night, I sat staring at my computer screen, replaying his words. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of my office window. Tired eyes, gray hair, a father who'd spent years protecting his daughter, now being blackmailed by the man she loved. That's when I made the call. I didn't give him the money. I froze his account, every last dime. But I wasn't ready for what happened after. See, when you take down a snake, you expect it to hiss. But Ethan didn't hiss. He struck back. The next morning, the day of the wedding, Grace was gone. Her phone off, her car missing. I called the police. They said maybe she needed space before the ceremony. But I knew better. I knew Ethan. I knew his pride. That night, I received a video message. My heart froze before I even opened it. It was Grace, tied to a chair, crying. Behind her, Ethan's voice. "You think you can humiliate me, Michael? You think you can take my money and get away with it? Let's see how far you'll go to get your daughter back." The phone slipped from my hand. My knees hit the floor. My office spun. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about money anymore. This was war, and I was ready to fight it. The video played over and over in my mind. Grace's face, her terrified eyes, her trembling lips as she begged me not to do anything stupid. Every second of that recording was like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. I sat in the dark corner of my office long after the sun had set, the city lights bleeding through the blinds. My hand trembled as I poured another glass of whiskey I didn't even want. For 27 years, I've been the man people trusted with their money, their secrets, their futures. But right then, I couldn't even protect my own daughter. The phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. 50,000 now, or you'll never see her again. I clenched my jaw. He'd reduced the ransom. Maybe he thought I'd bite this time. But he didn't know who he was playing with. I traced the number. One advantage of working at a bank with deep connections. You learn a few things that don't exactly appear in the employee handbook. Within an hour, I had an approximate location, a rundown motel on the outskirts of Joliet, Illinois. I called Detective Ron Harris, an old friend from my neighborhood. He'd been with the Chicago PD for 20 years, the kind of cop who'd seen enough evil to believe anything. "Ron, he's got Grace," I said, my voice cracking for the first time that night. "Ethan took her." I got a video. "Michael, slow down. You sure it's him?" "I'm sure," I snapped. "He wants money. I'm not paying him a cent." Ron sighed. "Send me the video. Don't do anything stupid until I get there." I hung up before he finished. I'd already done something stupid. I grabbed my gun. It wasn't supposed to go this way. I wanted the police involved, yes, but I also knew how slow they moved. Grace didn't have time for bureaucracy. I drove through the night rain, headlights slicing through the darkness. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. Every mile felt heavier, every thought louder. I kept hearing her voice in that video. "Dad, please, don't." By the time I reached the motel, the streets were dead silent. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for a black SUV with tinted windows. Ethan's. I parked 2 blocks away, rain soaking through my jacket, my breath fogging the air. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I moved slowly, every step echoing in my skull like thunder. Room 14. That was the one registered under his fake alias. Cole Evans. Clever. I peeked through the curtain gap. The sight made my blood boil. Grace sat tied to a chair, duct tape over her mouth. Ethan stood over her, talking on the phone, pacing like a predator. I lifted my phone and hit record. Evidence. Always get evidence. Then, as if God wanted to test me, Grace's eyes locked with mine through the small window crack. She saw me. Her eyes widened. Ethan turned. "Who's there?" he shouted, stepping toward the door. I ducked. My heart nearly exploded. Seconds later, the door burst open. He stormed out, gun in hand, scanning the parking lot. I froze behind a car, my breath silent. And then, sirens. 2 police cruisers screeched in, red and blue lights cutting through the rain. Ethan turned in panic, trying to run, but Ron's voice bellowed. "Drop the weapon. Down. Now." Everything unfolded in seconds. Ethan pointed his gun toward the cops. Shots rang out. Grace screamed. When I ran inside, she was sobbing, still tied, shaking uncontrollably. I fell to my knees, cutting the ropes with trembling hands. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. You're safe now." But she wasn't, because when the dust settled, when the officers cuffed Ethan, alive, bleeding from his shoulder, and dragged him out, I heard him whisper through his cracked lips, "This isn't over, old man. You think you can ruin me? You have no idea what's coming." Those words stuck like poison in my veins. In the weeks that followed, Ethan was charged with kidnapping, extortion, and assault with a deadly weapon. The judge denied bail and the court date was set. Grace tried to smile again, but she was broken inside. She refused to leave my house, jumped at every sound, and barely spoke. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 months later, I came home to find a letter on my doorstep. No name, no return address. Just one line inside, written in bold red ink. You froze the wrong account. Attached was a USB drive. Against my better judgment, I plugged it in. The screen filled with images, photos of me, Grace, and my late wife. But these weren't old family pictures. They were recent, taken secretly. Someone had been following us. Then a video popped up. Ethan's voice calm, confident, and cruel. You think this was about money, Michael? No, you took something from me. And now, I'm taking everything from you. The video ended with an image of the Liberty Union Bank building, my workplace, and underneath it, the words, check your accounts. I froze. My chest tightened. I logged into my computer, my fingers shaking, and then my heart sank into my stomach. Every major client account under my management, millions of dollars, was gone, transferred, erased. In one night, I went from being a respected bank officer to the prime suspect in the biggest internal fraud case in Liberty Union's history. By the time the FBI arrived the next morning, Ethan was smiling from behind bars, because somehow the system showed my login credentials were used for the theft. They arrested me in front of my daughter. Grace screamed, "No, my dad didn't do anything," as they dragged me away in handcuffs. I didn't fight. I didn't shout. I just stared blankly ahead, the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest like a stone. But even as they threw me into that cold cell, I whispered to myself the same words I said when I froze Ethan's account. You messed with the wrong father, son. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. Jail has a smell you never forget. Sweat, rust, and despair. It seeps into your skin, into your memories, into the way you see the world. I'd spent my entire life on the right side of the law, and now I was locked behind bars like a criminal. They called me the banker thief on the news. The FBI claimed I'd stolen over $8 million in client assets. My name was plastered all over every financial outlet in Chicago. Overnight, my 27-year reputation was gone. My friends stopped calling. My co-workers avoided eye contact. My life's work was shattered. But what killed me most wasn't the headlines. It was Grace's silence. For the first 2 weeks, she didn't visit. I couldn't blame her. She was traumatized, and now the world believed her father was a thief. The police had proof. My access logs, my signature on the digital authorizations, even security footage of someone who looked exactly like me entering the server room that night. Ethan had planned this, every single detail, and he had help. I spent hours staring at the concrete walls, replaying everything, the letters, the USB, the threats. Someone had been watching us. That meant he wasn't acting alone. But who? On my 3rd week inside, I received a visitor. When the guard opened the door, I froze. It was Grace. She looked different, tired, pale, her once bright eyes dimmed by fear. But when she saw me, tears streamed down her cheeks. "Dad," she whispered. "I'm sorry." I forced a smile. "You have nothing to be sorry for." She shook her head. "No, I do. I should have listened to you. About him." Then she reached into her purse and slid a folded piece of paper through the glass divider. "I found this," she said, "in a box Ethan left at my apartment before he was arrested." I unfolded it. It was a document titled Project Iron Vault, with lines of encrypted financial data and a logo at the bottom, Liberty Union Bank. My heart stopped. "Grace, where did you say you found this?" "In his things." "But Dad, look at the signature at the bottom." I did. It wasn't Ethan's. It was Martin Briggs, my own colleague, my assistant manager, the man I'd mentored for 10 years. And suddenly, everything clicked. Ethan didn't have the knowledge to hack the bank systems or fake my access. But Martin did. He was the only other person with credentials, the only one who could override internal logs. "Grace, listen to me carefully. I said, my voice trembling. Martin and Ethan were working together. Ethan was the face, Martin was the brain. They used my name to cover their tracks. That's why Ethan said I froze the wrong account, because the real money wasn't his. It was theirs. Her eyes widened. Then what do we do? I looked around at the guard pacing the hall. We expose them, but you need help. Go to Ron Harris. Tell him pull every internal audit from the last 3 months. He's the only one I trust. She nodded, clutching the paper like her life depended on it. That night, I couldn't sleep. For the first time since my arrest, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't just a father fighting for his daughter anymore. I was a man fighting to clear his name and burn down every liar who tried to destroy his family. But hope is dangerous. 2 days later, I was called into interrogation again. The FBI agent across the table looked smug, too smug. Mr. Reed, he said, tapping his pen, seems your daughter's been very busy. She sent us a document you might find interesting. I leaned forward. Good. Then you know I didn't do this. He smiled. Actually, we think you did even more than we thought. My stomach dropped. He slid a photo across the table. It was Grace, standing outside Ron Harris's car, her hands cuffed. What the hell is this? I barked. Your daughter was arrested this morning for evidence tampering and attempted bribery of a police officer. We found $50,000 in cash in her car. I slammed the table. That's impossible. She doesn't even have that kind of money. He leaned back, smug. Funny, because it was withdrawn from one of the stolen accounts you managed. I felt my world collapse all over again. Ethan and Martin weren't just framing me anymore. They were coming for Grace. That night in my cell, I received another letter slipped under the door. No envelope this time. Just one line in familiar handwriting. The game ends when you beg. I tore the note apart, rage boiling through me. They wanted me broken. They wanted me hopeless. But I wasn't giving them that satisfaction. The next morning, I demanded to call my attorney, a sharp woman named Linda Navarro, who'd been handling corporate fraud cases for 2 decades. When I told her everything, she didn't flinch. Michael, she said, if you're right, we're not just dealing with one criminal. We're dealing with a syndicate. I frowned. Syndicate? Yeah, she said. Martin's name popped up in 2 previous investigations, shell corporations, offshore accounts, insider trading. He was cleared both times. But guess who represented him? I leaned forward. Who? She smiled grimly. Ethan's uncle, federal prosecutor James Cole. My jaw clenched. Of course, Ethan's connections. That's how he always got away. Linda continued. They've been laundering money through Liberty Union for years. You were the perfect scapegoat, a senior banker with full system access, nearing retirement, with a clean record. Nobody would question it. I felt sick. So what now? She looked at me, her eyes hard. Now we turn the game around, but it's going to get ugly. Over the next few weeks, she filed motions, subpoenaed Martin's personal accounts, and dug through the encrypted Project Iron Vault files. Meanwhile, Grace sat in holding, refusing to talk to anyone but me. And then, finally, a breakthrough. Linda stormed into the jail one morning, eyes blazing with adrenaline. They slipped up, she said, almost out of breath. Martin made a transaction last night, $200,000, to a dummy company called Fiancée Investments. I frowned. So, she said, CNC stand for Cole and Cole, Ethan's family business. That was the smoking gun. But before Linda could push the evidence through, Martin disappeared. His apartment was empty, his car abandoned near the airport. The cameras conveniently malfunctioned that night. And then came the breaking news. Ethan Cole had escaped custody during a hospital transfer after claiming chest pains. For a moment, the world stopped. The 2 men who destroyed my life were now free, and Grace was still behind bars. Linda grabbed my arm. Michael, listen to me. If they're gone, they'll come after her first. We have to move her into protective custody. I stared at her, my heart pounding. Do it, whatever it takes. But it was already too late. That night, As the guards made their final rounds, one of them stopped at my cell, pale as paper. "Reed," he said quietly, "you need to sit down." "What happened?" I demanded. He hesitated. "There was an attack at the county detention center. Your daughter." My vision blurred. My ears rang. "Is she alive?" I choked out. He swallowed hard. "They're still searching the wreckage." I fell to my knees, my heart breaking into pieces too small to count. The cell door slammed shut behind him, but I barely heard it. Somewhere, deep inside, the man who once believed in justice died that night. And what replaced him was something else. Something colder. Because now it wasn't about revenge. It was about vengeance. They said grief changes a man. But that night, grief didn't change me. It rebuilt me. For hours, I sat in that cell, staring at the cracked concrete, waiting for the guard to return with news about Grace. The seconds dragged like years. Every heartbeat was a hammer pounding the walls of my chest. When the officer finally came back, his eyes told me everything before his mouth did. She didn't make it. I didn't cry. Not at first. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a silence that screamed, a storm without thunder. Grace, my little girl, my only reason to keep breathing, was gone. The official story was that a gas leak caused an explosion in the detention center. But I knew better. That wasn't an accident. It was a message. Ethan and Martin had silenced her. And now, they'd unleashed something they couldn't control. A week later, while the world moved on and reporters scavenged for headlines, I sat across from Linda Navarro in a dim interrogation room. The FBI had agreed to review new evidence she'd found, but I knew bureaucracy well enough to know that review meant delay. "They won't move fast enough," I said quietly. She looked at me, hesitant. "Michael, I know what you're thinking. Don't do it." I met her eyes. "They took my daughter. You think I'm going to let them walk free?" She sighed. "Then at least let me help you do it the right way." We started digging deeper, through firewalls, through encrypted ledgers, through people who owed favors to people they shouldn't have. Linda was sharp, but I had something sharper, rage with direction. By the end of the week, we found what we needed. Project Iron Vault wasn't just a laundering operation. It was a global pipeline for dirty money, funded by corrupt corporate execs and government insiders. And Martin Briggs wasn't just Ethan's ally. He was his handler. Ethan's charm made him the face of the scam. Martin's technical genius made it possible. And Ethan's uncle, James Cole, the federal prosecutor, was a shield protecting it all. But I wasn't the only one who'd lost someone. Turns out, one of Martin's former employees, an IT technician named Ryan Walsh, had his wife killed in a staged car accident after he threatened to leak company data. Ryan had been hiding for months, living under fake IDs, tracking the same syndicate I was. When Linda found him, I'll never forget his words. "I've been waiting for someone who wants blood as bad as I do." And that's when the three of us formed a plan. Linda would use her legal access to the court archives and bank databases. Ryan would hack into the Iron Vault offshore servers. And me? I'd be the bait. It started with a leak. A forged message, sent from my inmate email, claiming I had a hidden drive with all the Iron Vault transaction data, and that I'd traded for my freedom. Within 48 hours, Ethan's uncle took the bait. He arranged a private meeting between his legal team and the prison board, supposedly to negotiate a deal. But what he didn't know was that Ryan had already breached their systems. Every phone call, every encrypted message, every hidden wire transfer, they were all being recorded. The trap was set. On the morning of my release hearing, Linda met me in the courthouse hallway, pale but determined. "It's all or nothing today," she said. "Once this starts, there's no going back." I nodded. "Good. I don't want to go back." Inside the courtroom, James Cole stood tall in his polished gray suit, smiling like the devil himself. Ethan was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had it he was hiding overseas. But I knew better. He was closer than anyone realized. The hearing began. Cole's lawyers painted me as a disgraced banker seeking attention. I sat quietly, letting them talk, letting them believe. Then Linda stood, calm, confident, and terrifying. Your Honor, she said, before this hearing proceeds, I'd like to submit newly authenticated digital evidence, time-stamped and verified by the Department of Justice Cyber Unit. Cole's face twitched. Just slightly. She handed over the file. The judge opened it on the screen. And then silence. There it was. Every transaction, every bribe, every communication. Cole, Martin, Ethan, all connected to the Iron Vault network. Offshore accounts, hidden servers, money trails leading straight to political figures and corporate CEOs. And then the final nail, security footage showing Martin and Ethan planning the gas leak device at the detention center. The courtroom erupted. Reporters gasped. Cole's lawyer stood frozen. The judge slammed his gavel. Order. But Cole wasn't done. His face twisted into something dark, feral. You think you won, Reed? He spat. You think the truth matters in the system we built? Before anyone could react, he reached into his briefcase. A gun. Screams filled the courtroom. He fired. Linda Dove. The bullet missed me by inches. Chaos exploded. Officers tackled him to the ground, his gun skidding across the marble floor. As they dragged him away, blood on his lip, he sneered at me. You'll never get Ethan. I stood up slowly, shaking, the weight of everything crashing over me. I don't need to, I said coldly. He'll find me. And I was right. 2 nights later, at 2:13 a.m., my doorbell rang. I opened it slowly, gun in hand. There he was, Ethan Cole, thin, desperate, eyes wild. Rain drenched his clothes. You ruined everything, he hissed. She didn't have to die. My voice broke. You killed her, Ethan. He shook his head violently. No, your pride did. You froze my account. You started this. Lightning flashed. We stared at each other. 2 broken men standing in the wreckage of their own hatred. Then he reached for his gun. I didn't hesitate. 1 shot. He fell. And for the first time since Grace's death, I felt nothing. No rage. No fear. Just silence. When the police arrived, they found me sitting on the porch, rain pouring down my face like baptism. I handed them the gun and said quietly, "It's over." But in truth, it never really was. Months later, I was acquitted of all charges. Liberty Union reinstated my name, though I resigned immediately after. I left Chicago for good, bought a cabin in Montana, far from the noise, the greed, the ghosts. Sometimes I still hear Grace's laughter in the wind. Sometimes I still wake up expecting her to walk through the door with coffee and that soft smile. But she doesn't. She never will. And that's the punishment I'll live with forever. Because revenge doesn't bring peace. It only replaces one kind of pain with another. But still, every time I see the rain, I remember that night. And I whisper to Storm, "You mess with the wrong father, son."